right, we're live.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 54 of Indexer Office Hours. Today is Tuesday, March 29th, 2020. And if anyone is new to Indexer Office Hours, we love participation. You can do so by voice or text, either request to join the stage to speak, or add your questions and comments to the stage chat channel. As a reminder, this session will be recorded and will be distributed via public channels like YouTube. We have an exciting agenda today, which has been posted in the stage chat channel in Discord. Please find it there, and so you can follow us along. As a token of appreciation for those that join us live, we'll be distributing a PO-app. To claim, you'll need to use the PO-app mobile app and the secret claim word. Listen out for the secret word later in the session. The claims close about 10 minutes after IOH ends. Okay, so in last week, the recent GRT IQ episode is episode 57 with Jim Cousins for Wave 5. This was a very special episode because GRT IQ officially turned 1 year old, and that is why they reinvited Jim Cousin, who was also the very first guest of this podcast when the podcast started. So I found this a super interesting conversation. Jim always has super valuable insights. He offers, although he offers some really sober perspective on where Web3 systems are falling short today and what work we need to do to get there, he also explains why the huge progress that has been done in Web3 since we started, and he's also, you guys might will know him as a special person to the IOH, as he was the original IOH host and set the tone for this level of collaboration that we are seeing today in the community. I feel like, Chris, I want to put you on the spot because I know you and Jim have a great relationship, and you'd give him a better shout out than what I managed to do today.
Sure, yeah. I just would highly recommend listening to the episode. Jim's always, his perspectives are always worth listening to on Web3. And as Anna said, I think he has like a really honest and as she said, sober perspective. There's so much hype in Web3 and in the field, and it's good to take an honest look at where things are falling short or what we need to do better. And Jim is always a great voice with that respect. And I'd say the other thing that's really fantastic about the episode is to see how far the podcast has come. I think you kind of go back to the original episodes, and you can hear that I guess Web3 is just such a nascent space then, and in the last year, I think like the sophistication of knowledge sharing and understanding that is prevalent through the episodes has just skyrocketed, and the quality of the whole thing has evolved into something really special. So yeah, definitely have a listen.
Thank you.
I would love to add to that, because Jim is a great friend. Those who haven't even listened to episode 1, I would start there. Start with episode 1 and then his second one. They're both great. Jim in the community, I look at him as the soul of our community. You have those people, and Jim is one of them, who can really be the person that everyone looks up to. And Jim is taking his own words by heart and seriously in uplifting others. I see a number of people here on this call right now, and that includes myself, that have benefited from Jim's support. Jim's support to get started in the community, to get a foothold, and to succeed in whatever role that we are in right now. And that is something where he leads by example and is really coloring off for me, where I feel inspired by it, wanting to do the same. And, that is something I think you don't find very often. And I love Jim, and I know he's not here today, but I'm sure he's going to listen to this episode. Great guy.
Thank you so much for those words. I've heard those words many, many times before from the community. So that seems to be the overall consensus on Jim. So if you ever meet him, learn from him. Okay, so moving on. Last week we've announced Graph Day, which will be on June 2nd, 2022 in San Francisco. Join us. And also in the agenda, there's a link to apply to the Graph Hack that will be happening between June 3rd and June 5th, 2022. So I'll be excited to see you all guys at the Graph Day as well. Moving on to RepoWatch. For Geth, we haven't had any new releases. Last release has been version 1.10.16. For Aragon, we have had a new release 2022-0302 beta. And here, what's noteworthy is a new version of MDBX that contains a workaround for a Linux unified page buffer cache flaw. There's also some other debug fixes that were important for this release. For Open Ethereum, no new releases. The last release has been version 3.3.4. For Streaming Fast Geth, no new releases. Last release has been Polygon version 0.2.14 temp spam hotfix. For the Graph Stack, no new releases. Last release has been version 0.25.2. And here worth mentioning issue 3398, which was submitted by David Luther. Thank you for submitting. And this is about when GraphNode starts, it tries to connect to all configured network providers. So if a provider doesn't respond fast enough during startup, it is removed from the configuration and never used again. The issue suggests that instead providers should be retried automatically and periodically. If a connection has been established, they should be added into the list of providers. For Indexer Service and Agent, we haven't had any new releases. Version 0.19.0 pre-release has been the last release. And here we have a new pull request that's worth mentioning. Pull request 396 that implements file-based configuration for the Indexer agent such that the configuration file supplements base default for a cluster. So thank you for submitting, Kai. And that's it for RepoWatch this week. Does anyone from the community have anything to add on all of the things I mentioned on RepoWatch?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we've tested out the new version of Aragon on old kernels, so this is affecting anyone that's running a Red Hat or Rocky Linux release. Works just fine. We're running it. Our 2 Aragon nodes are running in lockstep, so should be good to go on kernel 4 and 4.18 and below.
Awesome. Thank you, Kai. Anything else? I will take that as a no, and I will hand over to you, Juan, for Protocol Watch.
Thanks, Anna. So today in Protocol Watch, we have a few things to cover. Trying to be brief here, but we'll start with the contract repository. There are 3 pull requests. The first is a draft for some Arbitrum Bridge implementation. This is related to L2 scaling, still in the very early stages. yeah, there's some work being done there for possible Arbitrum integrations. Then there's a pull request for which was merged for adding the multi-call to the staking contract and keeping the legacy batch calls, which were I think close and allocate many and all of those still available, even though we have multi-call now, so you can basically mix and match whatever you want. And there was another pull request which is still open, but it's only really important for development purposes. It's so that the testing suite behaves differently in the way that blocks are mined in the hard hat local environment. In the core network subgraphs, there's no new updates since the last IOH. Going into form governance, there's still a slight small debate regarding whether or not GIP 25 data edge, not 25 principal protected bonding curves. There's like a slight overlap there because of this debate. It's still being debated if it's a GIP or a GRC. Nothing really important, to be honest, but it's a small like nomenclature difference as to whether data edge is an actual implementation that needs to go as a GIP or as a GRC. Moving into forum research, there's a few things that would be nice to cover here. First of all, there's a new proposal regarding decaying curation tax. This proposal came from both Brandon and me. We realized that with principal protected bonding curves, we can now delay. There's a possibility to delay the curation tax until the withdrawal instead of like having to tax it on the deposit. Since you can actually tax only the deposit, which wasn't previously possible in withdrawals, because once you withdraw, you had some royalties, so you will be also taxing the royalties. With principal protected bonding curves, you can do a differentiation between the deposit and the royalties, so you can tax only the deposit at the withdrawal stage. And there's also a potential implication as to you being able to actually decrease the curation tax if the actual signal was long-lived. So if, for example, it's a curator like leaves the signal for like a year, you might be able to just don't tax it at all because it's already like a long time, it's a long investment, so you don't really need to tax it. So it allows you to differentiate with principal protected bonding curves and withdrawal stage curation tax. You can actually differentiate between different kind of like behaviors and incentivize those that you like. There's also GIP 17. This is the 550 pull request that was merged, which adds multi-call as well as the batching calls in the staking contract. Nothing really new here. It's just letting people know that this was merged. There was also last week the GraphCode research and development roadmap was released. We're not going into full detail here. It's a huge document, so feel free to look at it. It's super amazing. There's a bunch of stuff coming up in the roadmap. So yeah, I would highly encourage you to read it. Going into the last topic, GIP 27. This is something related to the state allocation discussion that we had. This is the formal GIP for that, which I think like the main idea is to allow the creation of altruistic allocations. So basically 0 GRT based allocations, which are immune, let's say, to being able to be closed by anyone else but the indexer. So you allow for backstop indexers to actually work, while at the same time adding a functionality so that you don't really need to be a delegator to someone to be able to close their allocations. So it's like a middle ground solution to the stale allocation discussion, making it easier for anyone to close stale allocations without needing to actually do an extra transaction. So you are a delegator for that indexer, while at the same time allowing altruistic allocations to exist. And that's basically it for Protocol Watch. I don't know if anyone has any questions about it.
If there are no questions about Protocol Watch, I just have an update on Repo Watch that I forgot to mention. Thank you. There has been a new streaming fast SF Ethereum version 0.10.0 RC3. And the main things that have changed here has been improving the substreams alpha client. And is anyone from Streaming Fast that would like to add anything else on top of this regarding the release? Okay, take that as no. I'll make sure to update the agenda with this release, and back to you, Juan.
Yep. So I'm guessing there's no more further questions for Protocol Watch, right? So I'll be handing it to Chris for the pinboard section.
Hey everyone, so the pinboard is where we keep track of issues relevant to indexers week over week. This week is the final call. If you're an indexer and you haven't yet submitted your Postgres locale, please do so. This helps us with graph node determinism. I will drop a link to the forum where you can submit your locale in the stage chat. And it's pretty straightforward. You just run a SQL command to get that out, and then you can submit the form. Please do that if you haven't already. This is also last call on issue 3059 on the graph node repository. You probably all know what that issue is for by now, but it covers the determinism of subgraph failure and kind of the miscategorization of that we've seen. As before, if you see subgraphs failing with non-deterministic errors that should be marked deterministic, please report the details in issue 3059. Finally, we have not yet got a GIP for the proposal to require a valid POI on allocation open. But the proposed implementation is still sitting in the contracts repo. That's PR 544. And then relating to the force close mechanism thread that Sam had posted some time ago, last week we covered pull request 549, which is Juan briefly covered in Protocol Watch, and we've since last week, seen GIP 27 released to accompany that implementation. So please give that a read. I'll also drop a link to that in the stage chat now. Any questions on anything on the pinboard? Or importantly, are there any other issues that anyone can think of that we should be keeping track of week on week? Okay, I'm guessing not, but at any point, please shout or drop a message in the stage chat, and we will keep track of those things. Next, I'm excited to hand over to Abel, who will be joining the GraphOps team next week and is coming to us from the 𝗨𝗀𝗃𝗃. Abel will be leading today's fireside chat with Jordan from 𝗨𝗀𝗃𝗃. Really excited for this discussion. So over to you, Abel.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. It's my pleasure to introduce you all to Jordan. Jordan will be my panelist today as we speak about all things reputation and badges. So welcome, Jordan, to the to IOH 54.
Glad to be here, Abel. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic, fantastic. So as I mentioned, we'll be talking about everything reputation and badges with Jordan. So Jordan, let's get right into it. So before we dive into the topic at hand, maybe it might be a good time to talk a bit about yourself, your background, and how you came to found Soulbound Labs.
Absolutely. So I guess the blockchain journey started back about a decade ago. I was roommates with Jackson Blazinski. He's the, I believe, the lead protocol researcher at the Graph. That's his title right now. And he was trying to convince me that Bitcoin was the second coming. I was like, no. But we had some great debates about it. And then over the years, he always kept me informed about the crypto world. And I was always a product guy working in startups up and down the coast of California. Got another taste of crypto with Brian Fox. He invented Orchid Protocol, and I worked under him for a bit. And then come the pandemic, I find myself with way too much free time and started investing in DeFi protocols. And then I was playing volleyball with my good friend and co-founder Connor, and turns out that not only does he know of the graph, he wrote an obscure subgraph called 𝗨𝗀𝗃𝗀 for the graph, and it was just a very strange coincidence that two of my very, very good friends are heavily involved in the graph, and then we saw Wave 1 grant applications open up, and the rest is history.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I do like the name Soulbound Labs. So I'm actually quite curious how you guys came up with the name and what the meaning behind the name is.
Yeah, there's a bit of backstory there. Originally, we launched as 𝗨𝗀𝗃𝗪, kind of badges on the Ethereum blockchain. Unfortunately, everyone in the world mispronounced that name. It was either Bad Geth, Bad Jith, and my heart broke when someone called that Bad Breath. We had to rebrand, and lo and behold, Vitalik started heavily posting about reputation, and one of his most recent posts, maybe about 2 months ago, was called Soulbound, about the potential for non-transferable NFTs to be soulbound to people's accounts, similar to World of Warcraft. And these special soulbound items endow unique powers, you know, you can't trade them like POAPs. And then we're like, soulbound, that's kind of what we're going for. And we have a lot of cool initiatives, so therefore Soulbound Labs. And we're live on Twitter, so that's that.
I love that. I love that. So there you have it, folks. You know a bit about Jordan, Soulbound Labs, and so now let's get into the meat of things. So the reason why I'm very excited about today's conversation is that there's an interesting role that reputation can play in improving the governance/voting system in crypto communities, right? And I think a lot of what we're going to be speaking about today kind of falls within that remit. So maybe to kick off that conversation, let's talk a bit about how you think reputation, and more specifically badges, can improve the entire governance process in crypto communities.
Absolutely. So right now, Vitalik uses the word dystopic to describe the state of affairs when it comes to governance. And that's a strong word. And I think what most kind of hurts Vitalik's soul is that governance has been financialized. Right now, you could go to most major DeFi platforms and take collateralized loans out for any governance token, and you can swing a vote this way. It is voting for the highest bidder. This is a bit scary and concerning with this push for decentralization. We want to grant the community more governance power, but if you can buy your vote for very cheap prices, because unfortunately most voters aren't very engaged in the governance process, it's a bit of a scary situation. So there needs to be perhaps a complementary system to help kind of serve as like a checks and balance to this token-based voting. So the hypothesis that we're going for, we haven't verified this, is that these reputation badges could kind of serve as indicators of how much legitimacy and reputation you have within a community, and your votes for governance would be kind of like dependent on the amount of reputation you've accumulated based on on-chain actions. And so this notion of like reputation-based governance, that's cool for the governance angle, but another interesting angle is social spaces. Right now in most Web3 discords and online communities, you can claim to be whoever you want to be. And not going to throw the Graph Discord under the bus here, but originally I claimed myself as an indexer, and I was able to be an indexer for a day. And it's a bit concerning when the person or community member you're talking to, you don't quite know who they are, you don't know their reputation, their history. And so I think governance and social spaces are like the two biggest areas that reputation badges could help clarify, increase trust, and just kind of like facilitate good communal interactions.
Yeah, you're so right. I do see how it could improve the protocol social space, as you put it, right? Like the sense of trust and community that can arise when you know who you're speaking to on the other end is a verified individual and is who they say they are, as well as all these governance kind of use cases. I'm really curious to dive into how the cookie gets made, right? How are you guys doing this technically, right? Like, how are you creating these badges? Like, how do you put them on chain for smart contracts to consume? Like, you know, you mentioned in my research, I realized that you guys do a lot of governance things on Polygon because it's obviously a low gas environment. So maybe you could talk a bit about how you guys create these badges to give people an understanding of how you guys leverage the graph and other technologies to pull off what you're doing.
Absolutely. So as everyone knows very well here, subgraphs are really good at computing deterministic data based on the blockchain. And there's a bit of human element here where the community can choose which on-chain behaviors and events are considered reputable. For example, reputable behavior for a delegator could be delegating to 1, 5, 10, 15 indexers. Reputable behavior for a curator could be signaling, be one of the first 5 signalers on a subgraph. For indexers, receiving at least one query fee an epoch, or indexing multiple subgraphs. There's a lot of like these touch points on the blockchain that really aren't being captured right now in your standard dashboards and metrics. It kind of takes the human element of like, this is cool behavior, it's noteworthy, and it endows reputation, either positive or negative. So in our subgraph, we assign badges based on these events, and these badges have a scalar value called a community score. This scalar value is between -10 and 10, 10 being the most beneficial to the network, -10 being the most detrimental to the network. For indexers, this would be like a sandwich attack being slashed on the negative side, or receiving hundreds to thousands of query fees could be, you know, you're doing a great job. And what we do is that subgraph-derived reputation is useful, but it's limited. Like a GraphQL API is fantastic, but what really gets interesting is if you start bridging this reputation data back on chain. So that's what we're working with Zach right now to create a technique and tool we're calling a Subgraph Bridge that users can take derived data from a subgraph, bridge it back on chain, and in the context of our work, we bridge it to mainnet in a compressed Merkle root form. Then we bridge that to Polygon. We unfurl all the reputation data on Polygon. So now you pretty much have the complete reputation history of every protocol worker on the graph. And this is fantastic because all of a sudden you can have smart contracts that use blockchain credit scores. You can have access control. Only delegators that are legitimate and repeatable can get into. And this is what we're really excited about, like on-chain behavior that gets unlocked, either with identity-based NFTs, smart contract access control, or just, you know, governance that can be like legitimately traced back to the blockchain through the subgraph. There's a lot to unpack there, so I'm happy to, like, whatever rung a bell there, I'll dive deeper into.
Sure. Yeah, that was a very good explanation of how the cookie gets made. I think one thing that perhaps maybe could be an interesting conversation to kick off is the one where, you know, I'll be honest, I'll throw my hands up here and say that when I first heard about this topic and began to do my research, I thought, badges. Oh, I know who's really good at badges. POAPs, right? I know the proof of attendance protocol. I've used that project before, right? But I think, you know, after doing some research and studying a bit more about what 𝗨𝗀𝗂𝗧 Labs is doing with Emblem, I think there's some very clear distinctions between the POAP system and what you guys are building, and I'd love to dive a bit deeper into that and maybe enlighten the audience on the inner workings there.
Absolutely. I would hypothesize that like POAPs could be viewed best as participation trophies. They're very lightweight, very easy to create, and they're kind of one-off events, usually for attending a certain conference or event or indexer office hours. That's fantastic. but they're not really good reputation signals because you can't legitimize them. You can't trace back to the on-chain event where it happens, nor can you kind of like create a pattern of like in the future, if someone does this, award them a badge. And I think that's where Soulbound Labs and Emblem comes in. We kind of define the pattern of reputation within the subgraph, and we continually award badges for both past, present, and future behaviors. POAPs are great little tokens, but I wouldn't trust them as the foundation to any on-chain reputation system or governance system.
Yeah, I do like that, dare I say, almost real-time aspect of these badges, in the sense that, you know, as the nature of the ecosystem changes and actors make different actions, the badge almost changes, right? Which I think is a really fascinating concept, and I guess what is different about what you guys are doing relative to POAPs. So, I mean, going down the rabbit hole of what this kind of unlocks, I'd love to talk a bit about, you know, some more governance, maybe social use cases that are unlocked with this kind of almost, dare I say, verifiable reputation. Maybe you could kind of do a bit of forward thinking there and you know, enlighten us on what you think the future could be.
Yeah, great question. I'll start with the social space because that's a little bit more encapsulated. Right now, like, you can't go to, you don't know, any of you fine folk here, I don't know if you're an indexer, delegator, curator, subgraph developer. I don't know your technical proficiency. I don't know if you're a community leader. And I kind of just have to like bunker down in the graph Discord for a few weeks to months to kind of figure out who's who. And that just doesn't quite seem right in the age of Etherscan. Like, it's all publicly verifiable data. And those who choose to opt in to like tie their Discord account to their like online wallet, they should be able to present their on-chain actions and their reputation. So I think that in the future, it would be beneficial to many Web3 communities to join and not only see who others are and see their historical reputation and activity, but also show off your historical reputation and activity. Imagine joining Uniswap's Discord, and immediately you could show off that, hey, I'm a graph indexer. I've been doing this for a year. I have 50 reputation score. I'm ranked number 5. And that gives you a little bit more legitimacy and reputation than the current situation, which is just endless DMs and like, are you who you say you are? And that's the song and dance we're all used to. And I don't think that's a good status quo. I'll pause there if there's any questions, and then I can talk about the governance angle too.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll do maybe one more question from this side, and then we'll open up to the wider community here to maybe ask some Q&A. What I want to do is we'll kind of open the stage up and have people kind of like ask questions, because I think what we'll do is we'll list out the questions and then we'll kind of attack them one by one, because I know there's a few people in here who have very interesting questions that they'd love to surface. So last one for me before we wrap up is when it comes to coming up with these sort of reputation, like when it comes to coming up with these sort of like reputation, what's the word I'm looking for? Markers. Do you have any suggestions? So say, for example, like the Graph wanted to adopt something like this. Like, how do you think our community could go about setting up these reputation markers to improve our governance process, or maybe our social process? Like, what do you think would make sense in those particular use cases as good markers, and that could be linked to badges? Absolutely. And just to give some more context there, if you go to emblemdao.com right now and check out the Graphs protocol page, all those badges you see are from a centrally defined subgraph that the Soulbound Labs team has whipped up as an example. I would not trust those badges as any like community-driven reputation signals. It's a centralized organization that has kind of like defined reputation. It's not appropriate for you to use these badges in really any governance or
economic use cases. But if the community can kind of collaborate on these reputation subgraphs, and there's community votes and governance process around these reputation subgraphs, such that those who earn reputation have more voting power to determine the next batch of reputation, there is a bit more legitimacy around these badges. And so if we can start defining as indexers, delegators, curators, subgraph developers, and off-chain leaders, what reputation is in this community, and like we get legitimate buy-in from all of these protocol roles and parties, really interesting use cases start popping up. I would suggest that at that point, if the community recognizes these badges as legitimate reflection of its values, perhaps it could be used in the ISA, the indexer selection algorithm for the gateway, and more reputable queries could go to them. It could be incorporated in snapshot votes where token holdings matter, yes, but also reputation could come into play. And there's all these new protocol-based use cases that could occur if the community kind of like comes together and says, yes, this represents us, and yes, we buy in. It's a question of, can we like derive that legitimacy? And right now, our challenge at Soulbound Labs is to really just be the facilitator here. We do not want to be the authority of reputation. And so we'd love to work with every protocol worker or contributor to the graph who's engaged in this process and get community buy-in as early and often as possible. And then we can hand the reins off to the community. The subgraph is decentralized on the decentralized network, but the NFT is owned by a DAO, which consists of the contributors of the community who can vote for upgrades to the subgraph or an on-chain. Anywho, I'm going to dive in too deep in the details. The thrust here is that don't trust our badges now. Trust them when you trust when you guys are doing the effort to build the badges, then it's awesome. Right now, we're not quite there yet, but we'd love to like engage in feedback, and we want your guidance about what badges are useful, and then hand the reins over to you guys.
Fantastic. Following that thread of that ask, what we'll do is we're going to post a message in the chat. Jordan, if you could go ahead and post that message, effectively asking if anyone who's interested in this conversation to get more involved, maybe have a follow-up conversation, just hit the thumbs up on that comment that Jordan is about to post. That would be fantastic. So there you have it. I think that was a fascinating section there, and I'm sure people in the audience are itching to ask their questions. And so we'll move on to Q&A. But before we do that, for those of you who have been keenly listening to today's Fireside Chat in IOH 54, we have the POAP secret word. And that secret word is verifiable queries. All one word, all lowercase, verifiable queries. So if you have the POAP app, go ahead and get your POAP. Fantastic. So we are ready to move into the Q&A section. So anyone who is already on stage, feel free to go ahead and unmute your mic and ask a question. And anyone who's in the audience, if you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll invite you to the stage and you can go ahead and ask your question. So anyone on the stage, if you have a question, please feel free to unmute your mic and let's get this show on the road.
Hey, Jordan. Really fascinating discussion. Thanks. You kind of started covering some of this detail towards the end of the last answer. And I do actually, I think it's super valuable to unpack this a little bit more because I think it shows like the power of putting the definition of these badges and reputation systems in the community's hands, but also, you know, the power of the graph's technology in enabling this. And so, you know, we've spoken about how, you know, all of the kind of criteria that defines whether an actor in a protocol, so for example, if say an indexer or a delegator in the graph meets the criteria to get a badge, like all of that criteria and logic is located in the subgraph. And that has some really interesting consequences. I mean, like verifiability is one, and you know, kind of the fact that you have indexers effectively, you know, enforcing that only people that have met the criteria actually receive the badge. And you have that kind of one of n honest honest participant trust assumption. But I think the other piece that's really interesting is that the community that defines this logic, right, like manages essentially the contents of that subgraph and like all of the badges and the criteria to receive them, that community could also be managing the GNS deployment, for that named subgraph, and I think many people in the call will know what that means. But effectively, the GNS instance can be upgraded, right? So we could actually change the definitions of those badges and the criteria and like evolve that reputation system over time. I just think that's really interesting. So I'd love if you could unpack that a little bit more. And how you see the ability for the community to execute a governance will on that reputation system could unlock new and interesting kind of powers.
Absolutely. Great question. So Nena, product engineer, product lead at the Graph, released the GNS NFT, which controls the subgraph deployments. And this GNS NFT can be transferred to a multi-sig wallet that a DAO could control. And what's really cool about what you're kind of like alluding to is that the subgraph is the DAO. It determines who can vote. And it's a bit of a self-reflective loop where the DAO updates the DAO's members, their reputation. And that really excites me. There's something very elegant about a recursive DAO that could determine what's reputable. And based off the quality of the governance surrounding that, the cadence of votes, how engaged the community is, it's much more evolving and a bit more, aligned with protocol contributors. Tokens are great for kind of like immediate distribution of like who gets what voting rights, but an evolving subgraph-based DAO allows people, the community, to recognize new behaviors and to kind of like punish bad actors a little bit more flexibly. So that is really neat. And I'm thinking of, I like the way you phrased that. So I'll stop there if there's any more follow-up questions, Chris. Great question.
Yeah, no, that was really interesting. I hadn't really thought of it in that kind of recursive nature, which is a cool way of thinking about it. And generally, I think one of the superpowers of subgraphs as these kind of verifiable packages of off-chain computation. I guess like thinking that through a little bit more. I mean, there are all these kind of interesting outcomes that become possible as long as we assume that reputation is not bridged out of the subgraph and back onto the chain. I think like that's an edge case that we can put aside for 1 second. But if that's not the case, then that would allow the community to effectively vote in revisions to the criteria that for existing badges, right? And obviously add badges or potentially even remove badges. Like, what do you think about that kind of surface area of capabilities? And, do you think that there should be any guidelines? Like, do we want to never remove a badge? Is that something that we shouldn't, do? Or have you thought much about that?
It would make our engineering work much, much easier if you never removed the badge. We're still trying to figure out how to compress into a Merkle root removed badges, but in practice, that's too in the weeds right there. What I think like a really interesting property of this kind of reputation-driven DAO that kind of votes on the DAO for the badges is that we're going to see a lot more governance engagement. Right now, voter apathy for Americans is an all-time high, but it pales in comparison to DAO voter apathy. I don't know about all of you, but I've joined many, many DAOs and I failed to participate because life goes on. But I do think there's some like interesting human element where like we're a bunch of tribes, we're back in the tribe of 20, 30 people, and we're kind of collaboratively defining reputation in evolving angles. And what it does, you can just define a few badges up front and just based off that, it kind of like becomes one of these Mandelbrot fractals and just starts spiraling out into more and more reputation badges. Interesting paradigms, and all I have right now are cool ideas and hypotheses. So this is part of the reason why I would love the thumbs up about just people helping out in this process. How does governance around a reputation-based DAO look like? I don't know, but I would love to find out because it sounds really awesome to my engineering brain and my Velociraptor brain. So thank you.
Hey, Chris, Kai here. So first off, I just want to say awesome work on your guys' subgraph. I love what I see so far. To what degree do you see something like what you guys are working on as growing outside of Graph and outside of the Ethereum ecosystem entirely? Like maybe some sort of mechanism by which we can track reputation of people that participate in the political space or in other aspects of our daily lives?
Great question. So it starts with the graph. We want to kind of work in-house to kind of perfect the reputation subgraphs and these on-chain reputation primitives. Next up, other protocols and DAOs that are inspired by Vitalik's kind of call to action to move beyond coin-based voting. And then after that, there's a bunch of talk about city DAOs and off-chain DAOs, but it always kind of comes back to token holdings. And that's unfortunate because whenever token holdings enter the equation, you get financialized behavior and you get auctions to the highest bidder. And it's just unfortunate. We're really good about that in the crypto world, financializing governance tokens. So I do see a bunch of potential for if communities can start defining behavior that's valid, and there could be perhaps a group of people putting reputable behavior on chain. And it'd be like a registry where you have to be an existing reputable member to bless this or vet that. Yes, indeed, this person cleaned up their trash on Thursday. That's a ridiculous example, but the point being that reputation, there could be a build back on chain, a bet from meat space to on chain. That was it. Great question, Kai. Thank you.
Jordan, I have a question. So you mentioned that you need the community help, and outside of us thinking of the badges that we'd want to see, what does that help look like to you? What can you actually do to help?
Absolutely. So this we've created in the spirit of radical transparency. Everything we're working on is on Notion right now. I'll post the link in stage chat shortly, but our roadmap, what's working, what's not, we want to be very transparent because the trap that we don't want to fall into is being the authority on reputation. Nope, not going to work. It needs to be community driven. And to that end, we are working on a few, so defining badges, critical. We would love just engagement with subgraph developers and indexers particularly. Subgraph developers, we are building these reputation subgraphs and we're defining the standards for that right now. We would love engagement on that angle. Indexers, just thoughts about we are not indexers ourselves, so we're always a little bit wary of breaking any machines and breaking people with our compression. And so just some dialogue about what's acceptable for people's nodes, as well as if anyone is a smart contract developer, we're actively working on a technique for subgraph bridging. We want to kind of turn each subgraph into a read-oriented rollup. So it derives, it computes a bunch of data, and there's a effective mechanism to put it on chain. And just to color that in a little bit, similar to indexers attesting that this query result is good, we're going to do the same thing here, where a compressed form of the subgraph entities is put on chain and the indexers attest to it. And so this is really cool because there's economic incentives for people to play nicely, put stuff back on chain. And if any indexer is playing fast and loose, that's a slashing event.
Awesome. Thank you. And I see on the stage chat that there is a comment from Mac saying that Veramo, used to be known as Uport, works extensively on digital identity with a lot of the same goals. are you able to comment on how Emblem compares to Veramo?
I'm unfortunately not too familiar with that team or initiative. I'm happy to talk afterwards. I guess, I can't comment on that. I'd love to talk to whoever and see what they're working on, though, and collaborate if possible.
I do have a follow-up question that goes into the same sort of space, though, and that reputation identity is so closely linked, and we know protocols like Ceramic with their self-ID that focus on identity, not so much on reputation. But my question is, do you envision going into the identity space yourself, or do you envision maybe looking into how you can integrate the program, if you want to expand to other Web3 protocols in particular, with protocols like Self-ID and Ceramic? What's your thought process there?
Great question. So I think we already have entered the identity space. We have created a on-chain SVG that's soul-bound to a person's account that regularly updates to reflect their on-chain achievements and reputation. This NFT, we're finishing up the touches on it this next 2 weeks, and anyone on the graph can mint it to see if they like it. So it's a humble step, but we thought it would be really cool if people could build, like Emblem could build the resume for people, and all of a sudden they have this just verifiable on-chain NFT based on their repeatable actions. They can't sell it, they can't send it, it's theirs, and that's pretty cool. So if that answers that question, we want to enter that space a little bit more, just in the nature of trust and this kind of like thrust of knowing who you're working with and helping people make economically sound decisions and social decisions. But yeah, that's what's up. I'll post a link to that.
So much great discussion. Jordan, I'm wondering how you think about how, I guess, off-chain, like reputable actions fit into all of this. Because the kind of quality of having verifiable badges for on-chain actions is incredible, but not everything that is relevant to reputation happens on-chain. So how do you think about that?
Absolutely. If folks check out, I'll post the link to our Notion document, but we have this Pillars of Reputation document, and we thought that, we know that there's a lot of small cap indexers who are heavily engaged in the community. And we're like, we should make a registry for that. And that sounds like a dumb idea, but if people who have on-chain reputation can attest that a person off-chain did something noteworthy, it kind of legitimizes it. You derive the source of legitimacy from verifiable on-chain reputation. You kind of unlock some off-chain reputation patterns. And have we gone beyond this initial notion of a registry that takes a 50% vote to get in on Snapshot? No. But that would be also something that I would love to talk to people about if they have better ideas.
I've just posted it in the chat.
Thanks, Abel.
You're very welcome. I just want to turn our attention to the folks in the audience here. Alexis and Ricky have their hands up. We did send you guys an invite to join the stage, so if you want to accept that,
it's actually the green hand is actually that we sent the invite to join the stage. I think
there we go.
Hand if they requested, yeah.
There we go. I learned something new. Thank you, Juan. I misread that. Okay, cool. In that case, let's stay up here. This doesn't look like anyone's raised their hands in the audience. So anyone on the stage, yeah, keep firing away because we have another 5 minutes.
To what extent do you see some of these reputation systems as an attack vector? If reputation becomes particularly, let's say that badges or reputation kind of fits into the protocol governance process, and by building up on-chain reputation, I can, gain some like meaningful advantage in governance. Maybe it's a vote multiple or something like that. Like to what extent do you think that reputation then becomes an attack vector? Do you think like there might be instances of actors kind of building up a good reputation in order to, unlock benefits within an ecosystem, only then to kind of rug pull everybody and on the basis of that good reputation do something bad?
That sounds like our politicians. No, it's a great question. It's I guess two answers there. We want to incentivize reputable behavior within this network and every network. We want to have social conventions and define pathways for people to become a contributor, kind of guide them from newcomer to veteran. And here's what's valuable. And yes, I think those should be tied to economic and governance rewards. And yes, you do open the risk of some sort of easy to accomplish reputable behavior. Maybe, let's say, for example, perhaps Uniswap. You can, one swap is worth 1 point. And so people make 10 million swaps and all of a sudden they are the biggest players in town. And that there does need to be a little bit of consideration when it comes to defining any governance strategy around this reputation. I would use the words like choose your own algorithm. These scalar values for each badge, consume them how you wish. Perhaps you cap the maximum reputation of any person or any group of people. So there's different voting blocks. Perhaps you have a checks and balances system, bicameral government, like somewhat what we have in many countries. And perhaps you don't care. And maybe just if one person delegates or makes liquidity swap 10,000 times, that's okay. And there's governance checks, at the multi-sig level. Perhaps there's a veto process of people who are extra reputable and determined on the community registry. So I guess this is kind of the exploration territory where the primitive is cool, but how it's consumed and used to improve governance, much cooler.
Fantastic. Oh, we have a question from Matt. Go ahead.
Yeah, man. Thank you for letting me ask this, but I just kind of was chatting about it on the stage, and essentially, yeah, we have, what is good reputation and what gets you good reputation, who essentially decides on this, and we do kind of all understand that it'll probably be community that governs what good reputation is, but as you said in the beginning of your talk, you said that DAO voting is at an all-time low. It's worse than, anything else. So if these are the people that are making the decisions for us, we pretty much got to get that participation up before we can institute reputable reputation a trustable reputation system.
I missed a word there in the center. What's the prerequisite to getting reputable reputation?
Community involvement in deciding what good reputation is.
Absolutely. It's a question of where does any governance system derive its legitimacy from the buy-in of the community. And, I could say that, we have a mandate from heaven to bring on-chain reputation to the world, nobody's going to buy in. It has to be an organic grounds-up process for there to be anyone to trust it. And yeah, it's a bit of an exciting paradigm where I feel in many governance systems, in most countries, and on the blockchain, it's set in stone once that token holders have X, or every man and woman has one vote above the age of 18, and we can't really change it because there's too much inertia and too many competing voices. But if you can kind of streamline that process, you can update governance, update reputation to really just evolve alongside the community and not be like a one-and-done type deal.
Also just jumping back to Varama, so I'm very happy that everybody is happy about reputation going on chain, because I worked on a project at a hackathon in 2018 on reputation, and I got shouted at by everyone. They're like, don't you dare bring Black Mirror into the real world. So have you had any of those sort of experiences where people are like, reputation is actually something that we don't want to have too much of, because it could kind of get to the point of that Black Mirror episode?
Absolutely. I believe the term used was Chinese social credit score. This is what we're doing.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what they use on me too.
And I want to clarify, like, why yes, there's a parallel there, but no, it's completely, like, not in the least. A couple things. So the Chinese social credit score, centralized authority, and you can't opt into it. You're kind of subject to it. You're enslaved to it. There's no exit strategy. These reputation systems, it's kind of like you got to get buy-in on the blockchain, buy-in at the community level. And if you don't want to participate, you opt out. And also, everything is public. Everything can be verified. The system in place is like auditable. And so I think there's like what we're perhaps doing is just standardizing. How do I say this? Already there's community conventions and social conventions about what is good behavior at the graph. And all we're doing is really just standardizing that and giving the community the ability to define it. There is some murky, weird territory once you enter the city DAO space and the real world space. And that's, I feel, the job of Vitalik to tell us how to do it, because I just read his blog post and pretty much follow what he recommends. So hopefully he'll come up with a solution at that point. I say that in jest. I do think there is some potential for malicious behavior if, reputation gets defined and everyone's score. But also, if it's community defined, not by a central authority, open source, accessible, then I believe my hypothesis is it would be much, much more beneficial to the social structure, to kind of harmony between people, and clear goals for people to kind of level up in their reputation. But this is getting into philosophy territory, many, many moons away. For now, on-chain reputations are focused, then off-chain once we've completely understood the on-chain aspect. But good musings, we're keeping it in the back of our head. We do not want to be anything like the CCP, social credit score. That's bad.
Most certainly not. Fantastic. I'm sure we could continue speaking about this topic for hours on end. Jordan, you're very well versed in this world of reputation. And so thank you so much for spending the time with us and sharing your insights. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you and to have you speak to this topic for our community. I can see that we have a decent turnout today, and I think that's testament to all the amazing work that goes on behind the scenes to make this call a reality. So thank you everyone for taking part. So I just want to wrap up because we are at the top of the hour. Remember, don't forget to get your POAP. It is verifiable queries. And yeah, just a big thank you to Jordan, to everyone on the call. If you guys do want to get involved, please do click a thumbs up on that comment in the stage chat. It's a bit up now. If you scroll, you'll find it. Also, the Emblem DAO team is hiring. So if you go to emblemdao.com/team, you can go ahead and check it out if you're interested in the topic and are perhaps maybe looking for your next challenge. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Jordan. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up today's conversation.
Abel?
Yes.
Sorry, is this too late? I just have one tiny comment to make.
Of course. Yes, of course.
There is a graph R&D roadmap. Ask Me Anything today on Reddit and Telegraph. I've just sent a link on the stage chat. I think it'll be interesting conversation. So if anyone has time to join, the link is on the stage chat. Thank you.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Feel free to check that out. Thank you so much, Anna, for squeezing that last one in. Really appreciate that. Awesome. Well, if there's anything else, I'll just do a final call in case anyone else has anything else they want to flag before we wrap up. If not, then it's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you, Jordan, and thank you everyone for joining today's call.
Thanks all.
Thanks,
Jordan.
Everyone. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.